In chapter 1, we talked about the introduction to baseball. We talked about the history of the MLB. We talked about the MLB divisions and how exactly that works. And then we also talked about the basic setup of a baseball field. Then in chapter 2, we talked about the MLB schedule. We talked about what spring training is. We talked about how the regular season games are divided. And we talked about All Star Weekend and what that is. And then we also talked about the postseason and how exactly that works. And then in chapter 3, we talked about the people involved in baseball. We talked about the commissioner and what exactly they do. We talked about the front office. So we talked about the owners, the president, and the general manager. And we talked about the role of each of those positions. We talked about the 9 players that you will see on a baseball field and what their positions are and what exactly they do. And we also talked about the coaching staff. Now, in chapter 4, we are going to be talking about batting because batting is one of the key fundamentals of a baseball game, and you need to understand exactly how that works. And we will be talking about that in this episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ball Talk 101. If you're new here, hello. My name is Chanel, and my goal with Ball Talk 101 is so that way you can close the knowledge gap when it comes to sports. So, in this episode, we are going to be continuing our book about baseball and start chapter 4, which is all about batting. Now, before we get started, please be sure to hit the subscribe button down below and also turn on notifications so that way you don't miss a single episode. And if you enjoy this episode, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up so I can continue to make videos just like this. Also, to check out the description box down below. That will give you all of my social media accounts. My TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, X, and Threads accounts all give you daily bite-sized news about what's going on in sports. My Snapchat is also in the description box, and that just gives you an inside look of what a day in the life looks like for me. Also, too, in the description box, you will also get the link to my newsletter. If you did not know, I have a newsletter called Ball Talk Breakdown. And what this is this is supposed to be a quick summary that is sent to you every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, straight to your inbox about what has happened in sports in the last week. So I want you to think of this as like you're drinking your coffee or you're drinking your matcha, and you just want a quick to the point summary about what has happened in sports, whether it comes to basketball, baseball, football, whatever it may be. And so that is what my goal is with this newsletter. So if you want to go and subscribe to that, then please be sure to click on the link in my bio and be sure to subscribe because new issues come out every Monday at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Also, too, if you don't want to watch this video on YouTube, this video is also available on Spotify, so you can listen to this on the go. That is also linked in the description box down below. And also, too, this video is available on Patreon. This video is 100% free on Patreon. So if you go to patreon.com/Ball Talk with Chanel, then you can go and sign up for my Patreon page. And you can also watch this video 100% free. So with all that being said, take out your pen and paper and let's start chapter 4 of our book about baseball, which is all about batting. So this chapter is going to be split into 6 sections. So in the first section, we are going to be talking about the anatomy of a bat, and we're also going to be doing the basic setup of a baseball field. Now you may be wondering, well, Chanel, you already talked about that in chapter 1. I don't understand what this is. So this section is going to be a little bit different from chapter 1 because this one will go more into details about what exactly the batter's box is, reviewing exactly where the foul line is, what is considered foul, and other aspects of the baseball field that you will see that is really important when it comes to when your team is batting. So that is what this section is going to be about, on top of, like I said, explaining the anatomy of a bat. Then in section 2, we are going to be talking about just batting in general and how exactly that works. So understanding a batting order, understanding a designated hitter, understanding a substitute, how exactly all of that works, we are going to be talking about that in section 2. Then in section 3, we will be talking about the rules of batting. So understanding what a strike is, what a ball is, what a foul ball is, right? What is considered fair play versus what is considered a foul. We will be talking about that in this section. Section 4, we will be talking about the types of hits that you will see. So understanding exactly what a grounder is, what is a pop fly, what is a line drive, right? Understanding all of that, that will be in that section. And then as always, section 5 will be a summary of what you have learned in this chapter. And then this chapter will conclude with a 5-question quiz that will test your knowledge on today's chapter. So with all that being said, let's get started. So let's start first with section 1, and let's start first with the anatomy of a bat. So you can see right over here that we have a picture of a baseball bat. Now, what I want you to understand is that in MLB, they use wooden bats. They don't really use aluminum bats, and that is just purely for the safety of the players. Okay, if there were players that were using aluminum bats, I think you will see a lot of serious injuries. Okay, so in MLB, they use wooden bats. Okay, so you see over here, you have a wooden bat. Now this section over here, this is called the knob. And then this long section right over here is called the handle. Now within the handle, you have this section over here, and this is called the grip. Now this section right over here is called the barrel, and then the end part over here is called the cap. Now when you see baseball players go and they hold their bat, they're always holding it at the grip. Okay, you really don't want to hit it at the knob or closer to the knob, because then it gives you less power, right? But then you also don't want it to be too high, because then you risk not only your hands getting hit with the ball, but then also too, you're going to shorten the bat, which actually could limit your range when it comes to swinging. So you will typically see the players hold the bat right over here in the grip. And when it comes to swinging, you always want the ball to hit the barrel. You don't want it to hit the cap. You don't want it to hit any parts of the handle, because it hurts. Trust me, I know this from experience. So you always want it to hit the barrel of the bat. Now, where exactly the ball hits determines what type of hit you're going to get, which we will talk about in a future section in this chapter. So now let's move on from the anatomy of a bat and let's look at a baseball field. So remember from chapter 1, I told you that this is home base, that these are the foul lines, okay? So I want you to look right over here where home base is at. You see these two boxes right over here? These are called the batter's box. Now, this is something I did briefly mention in chapter 1, but I want to talk about it now in more detail. So I want you to take a look at the fact that there are two batter's boxes that you see. Now, you're never going to be standing on both. You're always going to be standing in either one or the other. So you're basically almost standing sideways, and you're going to be facing the pitcher so that way you can swing. Now, which batter's box you decide to stand in is determined by what kind of batter you are. So if you are a right-handed batter, you are going to be standing over here. But if you're a left-handed batter, you are going to be standing over here. So if you are a right-handed batter, the way you will see the players hold the bat is that you will always see them have their right hand on top of their left hand. And then if you are a left-handed batter, it'll be the complete opposite. You will always see the left hand on top of the right hand when they're holding the bat. Okay? Now, I want you to keep two things in mind, right? First one being, what kind of batter you are determines on how the field players are going to shift, how they're going to move, which we will be talking about that in the future chapter. And number two is you're going to see that just because you throw one way doesn't necessarily mean you are going to bat that way. What do I mean by this? Sometimes you'll see a player and they will throw with their right hand as an example, right? That does not automatically mean that they are going to be batting with their right hand. You will see a lot of times, you will see some players where they would throw with their right hand and bat with their left hand, right? Or you'll see them throw with their left hand and they'll bat with their right hand, right? A lot of times how these players throw and how they bat will be actually listed, which we will talk about too in a future chapter. But what I want you to get out of this is just don't make the assumption that just because someone throws one way means that they bat one way, because that is not always the case. So now with all of that, now let's actually move on to the second section and talk about how exactly batting works. So understand that both teams have an opportunity to bat. This is not a scenario in which one team is going to be batting the entire time and one team is going to be on the field all the time. No, they will be switching from batting to being on the field to back to batting to being on the field, etc., etc. Now, who bats first is determined by who is the home team versus who is the away team, which, of course, with an MLB game, it will be very obvious. So if the team is the away team, they always bat first no matter what. There is no coin toss. There is no, oh, it determines by X, Y, Z. No. If you're the away team, you are automatically batting first. Now, looking at what is called a batting order, right, you will see 9 players, right, that are going to be in a batting order numbered 1 through 9. Now, let's stop right over here. Remember in chapter 3, when I was talking about the different field positions and how they are numbered, Okay, that is completely different than the batting order over here. Just because the first baseman is number 3 as a position on the field does not mean that they will be number 3 in the batting order. The batting order is completely determined by the manager and the bench coach. I want you to keep that in mind, that those are completely separate. Okay, so when I was talking about the field positions, I was just talking about how exactly the positions on the field are numbered, right? But that has nothing to do with the batting order. That is completely different, so please keep those separate. Okay, so like I said beforehand, the batting order is determined by the manager and the bench coach. Now, what you will see is that it will be numbered 1 through 9, right? And your 1 through 5 are typically going to be your best hitters. Now, there is strategy as to what a lot of managers and bench coaches have when it comes to batting, right? Maybe they'll make their best hitter the first one. Maybe they'll make their best hitter the fourth one, right? But typically what you will see, right, that is pretty standard across all teams is that your first 5 batters are typically your best hitters on the team. Now, the players that you will see on the field will be the same players that you will see in this batting order, with the exception of the pitcher. Usually the pitchers do not go up to bat because you want to make sure that they are saved and they preserve their energy for actually pitching on the field. Now, remember in chapter 3 when I said that there are other positions besides the positions on the field. That is where this comes into play. You do have a position that is called a designated hitter. And what a designated hitter is exactly what it sounds like. And that is basically their job is only to hit. You will never see them on the field. You'll never see them even put on a glove. Their only job is just to hit the ball and go on base. That is their only job. So you will see a designated hitter and then another 8 players, right? So you have 9 total players that you will see in a batting order, going in order of 1 through 9. Now, this batting order is no secret to the other team. The other team is always aware of what the batting order is because they will be communicating to the pitcher, okay, I want you to look out for this batter, okay? This batter, is a very heavy hitter, so make sure you do some change-ups, whatever it may be. So the other team is always aware of what exactly that batting order is. Now, let's say, for example, someone on the team goes and they get hurt, right? I'm just using that as an example. What a team can do is put in what's called a substitute. So that substitute will go in for that player. But keep in mind, though, that just because the substitute goes in does not mean that the batting order changes. What do I mean by this? So let's say, for example, you have a player and they are 5th in the batting order, right? And let's say, for example, they get hurt, they need a substitute. You put the substitute in, that substitute is going to be batting 5th. The batting order does not change just because you need a substitute. So I want you to think of the substitute as someone that is just filling in the slot. They're not changing the batting order at all. They are just filling in the slot for that player. So now when it comes to batting, what I want you to also understand is this is the part where you want to avoid being out, okay? Because of course, this is the time when you want to score. So if you get 3 outs while you are batting, then your team is done batting, and that's when you switch and you go onto the field. What I want you to just generally understand is you have to avoid getting 3 outs when your team is up to bat, because as soon as you get that 3rd out, it is time to switch to where your team now is going onto the field and the other team is going up to bat. So now with that being said, now let's actually move on to the rules of batting. So what you're going to see first, right, is you are going to see the batter go up to the batter's box, and you are going to see another batter go and stand on the side right over here, right? What this batter on the side is doing is they are just timing the pitches. Okay, so they want to see how fast this pitcher is throwing. They want to see what type of pitches this pitcher is throwing, which we will be talking about different types of pitches in a future chapter. They want to see exactly what this pitcher has in mind, right? So that is the whole point of you seeing the next batter up, is that you will see them basically try to time and understand how this pitcher is, so that way when they go up to bat, they know what they're looking for. So now let's kind of ignore them for now. Let's focus purely on the batter that is standing in the batter's box. So let's start first with the strike. Now a strike happens in one of these 3 scenarios. First scenario being that if the ball is thrown in the strike zone and the batter does not swing at all. So let's start from the beginning and explain what exactly a strike zone is. So a strike zone in general is just an area in which basically a pitcher goes and throws a ball and you reasonably can go and hit the ball. Okay, it's not too low, it's not too high, it's not too outwards, it's not too inwards, right? This is a reasonable area in which if the ball is thrown over there, you can go and you can hit it. Now, who dictates what the strike zone is actually the umpire. Now, an umpire, I want you to think of as your referee in baseball. They're the ones that you will see stand right behind the catcher, just like in this photo right over here. Now, the umpire, with their calls, they will dictate basically what exactly they consider to be the strike zone. And your strike zone is going to vary by umpire. Some umpires have a little bit of a higher strike zone. Some umpires have a little bit of a lower strike zone. But the general rule for the strike zone is that it is always from the chest/armpits area down to the knees area and extends out to as far as the base goes. That entire section over there is called the strike zone. So as long as a pitcher goes and throws it in there, in that area, then they have thrown it in the strike zone. So in this scenario, if the pitcher goes, they throw the ball is in the strike zone, and the batter does not swing, that is still considered a strike. Okay? So that's one way in which you can go and get a strike. Second way is if the ball is thrown in that area and the batter goes and they swing it and they miss. So this is fairly standard. If the pitcher goes and they throw the ball and then the batter misses the ball completely, that is also a strike, right? Now, I want you to think of this third scenario too, right? Because I said that the strike zone is where the pitcher should be throwing, right? Because this is reasonable as to where the batters could hit, right? Now, pitchers are not perfect, right? They are human beings. So a lot of times you will see them throw too outside or too high, too low, right? So if the pitcher throws a ball outside of this strike zone and the batter still goes and they swing and they miss it, that is still considered a strike. Even though the pitcher did not throw it in the strike zone, the fact that the batter still went and swung at it is still considered an attempt and therefore considered a strike. Now, like I said beforehand, right, you do not want a strike because each batter is afforded 3 strikes. So after your third one, you are out and the team gets an out. And like I said beforehand, a team can only get 3 outs because after your third one, then that's when you go and you stop batting and you go onto the field. Now, let's move on from the strike and talk about a ball. Now, the ball is what I was just describing beforehand, and that is when the pitch is thrown outside of the strike zone. So that's when, like I said beforehand, it's thrown too high, too low, too outside, too inside, right? That is where it is considered a ball. Now, in those scenarios, right, you as the batter do not want to swing at those. Why? Because like I just mentioned beforehand, if you go and you swing at those and you miss, that is still considered a strike. So when you see a pitch that is thrown that is too high or too low, or it's basically a ball, then you'll hear the umpire call ball. Now, a batter is able to have 4 balls while they're up there. After your 4th one, the batter automatically goes to first base. Automatically, right? After your 4th one, you go to first base. Now, here's what I want you to understand, right? Which is that, remember what I said is that you are allowed to have 3 strikes and you're allowed to have 4 balls while you're up at bat. If you see a scenario in which a batter has 2 strikes and also 3 balls, this is called full count, right? So when you hear people talk about full count, that means that 2 strikes were thrown and 3 balls were thrown, right? So this next pitch could determine if this is going to be another ball, then the batter gets to go to first base. If the pitcher throws a strike, then the batter could be out, right? That is exactly what full count is. I want you to think of that as like your suspense moment of what exactly is this next pitch going to be. Okay, so that's easy, well said and done. Now, what I also want you to keep in mind too is this. If the pitcher goes and throws a ball and that ball goes and hits the batter, that batter automatically goes to first base no matter what. So also keep that in mind. Now, I want to talk about the difference between a foul ball and what's considered fair play, right? Because there are very general rules, but then there are also very specific rules, okay? So let's start first with a foul ball. Okay, a foul ball is when a batter goes and they hit the ball, but it basically goes out of bounds. So let's say, for example, the batter swings and it hits the top of the bat, right? But the ball still continues to go backwards, right? And even if the catcher catches it or not, right, that is considered a foul ball. Or even this. Remember that I was talking about how these are the foul lines, right? Which means that this is the foul area. So if a batter goes and they hit the ball, but it lands right over here or over here, that is considered a foul ball. Now, a batter can have as many foul balls as they can. Okay, that does not count towards a strike. It does not count towards a ball. It's its own separate thing. And I want you to also keep that in mind, right? That a foul and a strike are two completely different things. Just because it is a foul ball does not automatically mean that it is a strike. Okay, I want you to keep that in mind. Remember that a strike is when a batter goes and they completely miss the ball. Like the bat does not touch the ball at all. A foul ball is when the bat does go and touches the ball, but it goes basically in the foul area of the field. Okay, so a batter can have as many foul balls as they can, right? They absolutely can. It's basically unlimited. Okay, now of course a lot of people are going to be frustrated because it's like, okay, like let's hurry up. Either make it the next one a strike or just hit the ball, something, right? People are going to be frustrated, but by the rules, you can have as many foul balls as you want. You're still going to be up to bat. Okay. So that is the general rule. Now, when something is fair, that basically means that the ball was hit and it's hit within the foul lines. So whether it is hit in the infield or it's hit in the outfield, as long as it is within the foul lines, it is considered fair. Now, those are very, very general rules. Now let's actually get into more specific rules, right? Because this is where it becomes a little confusing. Okay, so let's say you have a scenario in which a batter goes, they hit the ball, and it goes into outfield and it bounces in and then it bounces out, right? So it lands right here and then it goes and it lands over there, right? This ball is considered in fair play. Even though the ball ended up in the foul area, the fact that it is in the outfield and it bounced in the fair area means that it is automatically fair no matter what. And this is important because this is what the batter wants to be able to go to first base or even keep going if that is the scenario. So let's say, for example, now that the ball is hit and it does not go beyond first base or even third base, right? And it stays in the infield. What happens as to whether this is a fair play or a foul ball determines on what, not the first bounce of what happens, just like what I was talking about beforehand, but what happens with the second bounce. So let's look at this, okay? Let's say, for example, the ball goes and it hits infield right over here, but then it bounces out of bounds. This is considered a foul ball, okay? Now, if this bounces in here and then it bounces again in the field, then this is a fair ball. So what I want you to think about, because this is where it becomes confusing, is this. If it goes beyond the first base or the third base, right, and it hits within the foul lines, it is automatically fair. Automatically. No matter what happens with the ball, it's automatically fair. If the batter hits the ball and it stays in the infield, then it's the second bounce and where it lands. That's what determines whether it is foul or if it is fair. Okay, so I want you to keep that in mind because, like I said, a fair play is what a batter wants because that is what's going to allow them to go to first base. So let's say, for example, a batter goes and they hit the ball and the ball ends up all the way over here in the stands. As long as it is within the foul lines, that ball is automatically a home run. And we will be talking about home runs and all of that in the next chapter. Okay, but that is not a foul ball. That's not any of that. But if the ball gets hit into the stands and it is, for example, over here or over here, then that is a foul ball, right? Because now you are beyond the foul line. You're in the foul territory. But as long as it is still within the foul line, that is considered a home run. So now that you understand the rules of batting, now let's actually talk about the different types of hits that you can get. So remember when I was talking in section 1 about the anatomy of a bat, and I said that every batter wants the ball to hit the barrel, right? And where exactly the ball hits the barrel determines what type of hit happens, right? And so now it will make sense over here. So let's start first with what a ground ball or a grounder is, right? So you're going to hear people use both, like a ground ball or a grounder, right? It's the same thing. What a ground ball is this is when the batter goes and they hit the ball and it immediately bounces onto the field. So when you see those scenarios where you see the ball immediately start bouncing or goes to the point where it is basically rolling, that is a ground ball. Now, usually a ground ball happens because the ball went and hit the bottom of the barrel. So as the batter is swinging, the bottom of the barrel is the one that made contact with the ball, and that is exactly why there was a grounder. Now, this is completely different from a pop fly. Now, a pop fly is when you see a batter go, they swing, they hit the ball, and the ball goes straight up into the air. Now, I want you to think of this as like the ball basically went and made like a rainbow shaped, right? When you see that type of hit, that is called a pop fly. Okay, and that usually happens because the ball made contact with the top of the barrel. So as the batter was swinging, it was the top of the barrel that made contact with the ball, which is why that it made that rainbow shape, right? So when you see a rainbow shape or the ball going straight up into the air to then come down, that is called a pop fly. Now you have what's called a line drive. Now a line drive is when the batter swings, hits the ball, but the ball does not make that rainbow shape. Instead, it literally makes a straight line, right, as it's going down into the ground. Okay, now this actually happens when the ball makes contact with the middle of the barrel. So when you see the middle of the barrel make contact with the ball, that is what happens. You will get a line drive. Now again, I don't want you to get a line drive and a pop fly mixed up. Remember, a pop fly is a rainbow shape. That is when the ball goes straight up into the air. The line drive is when the ball is still in the air, but it is going straight through, hitting the ground like a literal line. Now, there are two other ones I want to talk about that is extremely rare in the MLB, but you will see this in like high school and college. The first one that you will see is a bunt. And what a bunt is that this is when the bat is placed in front of home plate, but that is for the purpose of the ball just landing right there in fair play. So what do I mean by this? So I want you to take a look at the field over here. So remember that anything that is within the foul lines is considered fair play, right? So what you will see sometimes batters do, like I said, in high school and college, what you will see is you will see a batter place their bat just in front of home plate. They won't swing, they won't do anything. They will just place the bat right in front of home plate just for the purpose of the ball making contact with the bat. Now, because the ball will typically land in this area right over here that is circled, this is still considered fair play, right? So a lot of batters will go and do that and then immediately run to first base. Now, like I said beforehand, this is extremely rare in Major League Baseball. But why exactly do baseball players do that? Usually they do that as part of a strategy of a sacrifice, right? So that's if, you have different runners up and then you want to make sure that the runner advances and then you're willing to let this person go out. That's usually the reason why. We'll talk more about strategy and everything else in the next chapter, but just understand that there is another type of swinging/batting method that's called a bunt. But like I said, it's extremely rare to see that in MLB. Now, another type of hit that you will see that is, again, rare in MLB is what is called a running swing. And basically what that is when you will see the batter basically run within the batting box and they basically keep the bat near them and then they go and they make contact with the ball and keep going. Right? Usually you'll see this more in like softball or even in high school baseball, right? Like I said, this is really rare in Major League Baseball, but the whole point of this is so that way you get a running start to get to first base. That is the only point of this, but like I said, this is really rare that you will see this in Major League Baseball. So now with all of that, let's summarize what you have learned in this chapter. So first you learned about the anatomy of a bat, right? You learned exactly what the barrel is, you learned about the knob, the grip, the cap, everything else, and you learned about the fact that the baseball players really want the ball to make contact with the barrel. You also learned about a field setup when it comes to what exactly the batter's box is and why there are two different types of batter boxes and what exactly their purpose is. You also learned about the batting order. You learned about what the purpose of it is. You learned about what a designated hitter is, what a substitute is, and you learned that the other team always knows exactly what the batting order is. Then you learned about the rules of batting. So you learned about what a strike is, what exactly the strike zone is, the difference between a ball and then a foul, and then what's considered fair. You learned about all of that in that section. And then you also learned about the different types of hits that you will see. You learned about the difference between a line drive and a pop fly, to where a pop fly is a rainbow shape, whereas a line drive is more of a straight line, right? You learned about what a ground ball was, right? Where it immediately goes and makes contact with the ground. And then you also learned what a bunt is and a running swing is, which is extremely rare to see in Major League Baseball. So that is all for this chapter. And so now you are ready to take your 5-question quiz that will test your knowledge on today's chapter. And I will see you in chapter 5 when we talk about the runner.